and open. Stand by.
Welcome everyone. Good to have your company this hour. I'm Nick Haynes from KCPT, KTWU's sister station in Kansas City. When Kansas 2nd District Congresswoman Lynn Jenkins announced in January she would not seek re-election after almost a decade in Washington, it set off a political scramble to replace her. Now it's down to 3 candidates who believe they are uniquely equipped to represent a district that covers almost all of eastern Kansas, from the Nebraska border down to the Oklahoma state line. Lawrence attorney and former U.S. Senate candidate Paul Davis is the Democratic Party candidate in this race. He spent 12 years in the Kansas House of Representatives and was House Minority Leader. Topeka Republican Steve Watkins comes to this race with a different set of experiences. He is a West Point graduate and former Army Ranger who served in Special Operations Forces in Iraq and Afghanistan. And if you're looking for another alternative in this race, you have one. That is Kelly Stanley. He is the Libertarian Party candidate. He owns and operates a tree service in St. Paul, a town about 30 miles drive northwest of Pittsburgh in southeast Kansas. By the way, this program is presented in partnership with the League of Women Voters. They're guiding the questions this hour, but we'll also be checking in with you on Facebook and on Twitter and from our studio audience right here at KTWU. So why do any of these candidates want this job, and what qualifies them to represent the more than 700,000 Kansans who call this district home? We've given each of the candidates 120 seconds to come up with an answer, starting with you, Paul Davis.
I'm Paul Davis. I'm a lifelong Kansan. I'm the son of 2 teachers. I'm a husband. I'm a father. My wife and I are raising our daughter here because Kansas has always been home for us. I started this campaign with a listening tour of all 25 counties in the 2nd District, and I've been back time and time again. I heard your concerns about how Washington just doesn't listen to us anymore, doesn't care about us. We have a broken Congress, and we have no choice but to fix it. And it starts with sending a proven problem solver to represent us in Washington. Somebody who knows how to work across the aisle and get things done. That's what I did for 12 years when I was in the Kansas legislature. It's one of the reasons why 36 current and former Republican elected officials support my candidacy. My opponent, Steve Watkins, and I have some very fundamental disagreements. I believe that we ought to preserve what's good about our healthcare system, and we need to fix what's wrong with it. And we need to attack the issue of cost by taking on the drug companies. Steve wants to take us back to an era where insurance companies can discriminate against us because we have pre-existing conditions like cancer or diabetes. I fundamentally believe we have to protect Social Security and Medicare. But Steve supports a plan that will trigger a cut to Medicare that affects every Kansas senior. He also supports means testing Social Security and is open to privatizing it. When I was in the legislature, I voted 150 times to cut taxes. Steve supports a tax plan that will give 83% of the benefits to people who make over $900,000 a year and will explode our federal debt. I'm ready to roll up my sleeves and work with anyone who wants to lower our healthcare costs, get our economy working for working people, and make Washington accountable to us and not the special interest. I look forward to the discussion tonight.
Thank you, Paul Davis, the Democratic Party candidate in this race. Kelly Stanley, the Libertarian Party candidate. Your 120 seconds starts now.
As Americans, we have the right to choose what we want to do for a living. Nobody can tell us we have to do this job or that job. But when we run for office, we are choosing to be a representative for the district, for the people in our district, to represent them on the floor of the House of Representatives. The problem we have today is that current representatives choose to represent their party instead of their constituents. It is time to clean the muck out of the swamp and get rid of the ones who represent themselves and only their parties instead of what their congressional district needs. You and I have a choice. In this next election, we can choose to stay with the same parties of Democrats and Republicans, or choose to elect someone who will vote according to what the needs are in their district. This year, in November, I am asking you to get involved. Not vote according to your party, but to vote for the person you know in your heart will do the job according to what our district in Kansas needs. Someone who will stand up to the Republicans and Democrats and inform them when they are wrong. Someone who can be that swing vote when necessary. Vote Kelly Stanley for Congress and I will represent you, not my party. I will do it for you as the voter because for once you deserve to have someone who will represent you and not the parties.
Thank you. Steve Watkins is the Republican Party candidate.
Good evening. My name is Steve Watkins. I'm a sixth-generation Kansan, a combat veteran, an engineer, a patriot, and a Christian. I want to thank KTWU for hosting tonight's debate. Every election is about choices, and the choices in this election could not be more clear. My opponent, Paul Davis, since graduating college, has spent his life as either a politician or a paid lobbyist, seeking to make more money and furthering his political career. I've spent my entire time in places like the Afghan-Pakistan border, in war zones as a qualified airborne ranger, and in the private sector as an engineer and a businessman. In the Kansas State House, Paul Davis racked up an extremely liberal voting record, a perfect fit for his district in East Lawrence, but not in line with Kansas' 2nd. Paul likes tax hikes, abortions, and higher spending. He will do everything and anything to detract you from his voting record, and most notably, lying about mine. He will tell you I didn't help start and grow an engineer and security outfit in Iraq and Afghanistan. I did. He will tell you that I'm not qualified to serve Kansas because I spent many years of my life outside Kansas serving in the military and in war zones. He's wrong. And finally, what it's really about. Paul Davis will tell you that the woman whose allies have given him $4 million, Nancy Pelosi, is someone that he will oppose in Congress. He lies. The truth is, I'm a seasoned leader with a servant's heart, and I just want to make the government more efficient, more effective, and more accountable. I love your support. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. As we broadcast this debate, by the way, this hour, a caravan of up to 5,000 Central American migrants has crossed into Mexico and is heading to the United States border. Kelly Stanley, beginning with you, what should be the response from Congress?
5,000 migrants coming to the United States. Are they welcomed? Or are we going to put a wall up to keep them out? What we need to do is we need to definitely secure our borders, but we also need to consider why these migrants are coming here. We have to look at every detail. We can't keep out people who need our help. We have to be able to understand the situation, and if they need our help, that's what we're here for. We've done it before. We've helped millions of other countries, and we've helped many of migrants, and if anything, we're migrants ourselves in the long run.
Thank you. Steve Watkins.
Sure, that's a great question. Well, last I heard, Donald Trump was throwing around the idea of sending down the military, active duty military to the border. I'm tracking, the latest I saw was 7,200 coming, and we don't have a wall. And so, listen, let's just be practical here. You know, they're heading our way. We don't know who they are. The Guatemalan president claimed that he has apprehended about 100 ISIS fighters within that group, I believe it was. And so this is something we need to take very seriously. Listen, we have the most generous, freest, richest country in the world, and a porous border. That simply doesn't make sense. So this issue, it's very important, but it's nestled into the larger immigration debate, which includes, in my position, includes ending sanctuary cities, chain migration, visa lottery, and getting it. But it starts with the border. Now, that's not to say that immigration is not a fundamental component of America. I mean, you know, my wife's an immigrant. We're all descendants of immigrants, and it's very important. It's one of the reasons this country is great. But we need to start first and foremost with keeping our borders safe.
Paul Davis.
This issue is symbolic of the broken immigration policy that we have in this country. I think that we need to stop this caravan long before it comes to our borders. You know, the immigration issue has been kicked around like a political football in Washington for far too long. And it's time that we have some people who are going to get beyond the partisan bickering and are going to get some things done for the American people. We need to have more border security. We need more resources for border security. And I think we need to listen to the experts who can tell us how best effectively we can secure our border. I support ICE. ICE plays a critical role in combating human trafficking, which is a problem that we know far too much about here in Kansas. I'm opposed to sanctuary cities. I think that law enforcement at all levels needs to work together. And yes, we are a nation of immigrants, and I believe those who are here that are playing by the rules, who are contributing to our economy, are paying taxes, should be given an earned pathway to becoming a United States citizen. Now, in his introduction here, Mr. Watkins made several statements about how I was lying about his record. Well, I want to read to you what the Topeka Capital Journal had to say about that in their endorsement of my candidacy. They said of Mr. Watkins, if he can't be trusted to run a truthful campaign, why should we trust Steve Watkins to represent us in the United States Congress? He has lied over and over again this campaign, and he has been caught by the Kansas City Star, by the Topeka Capital Journal, and by the Lawrence
that's as
Journal
much
World.
time as you have. We're going to move to the economy right now, starting with you, Steve Watkins. We hear that unemployment is at its lowest level since 1969. Consumers and businesses are the most confident they've been in years. Stock market indexes are at near record highs. But what about those who are struggling to meet their basic needs? How would your election to Congress help them in 90 seconds or less?
Sure. Well, the economy is doing great. A key component of that are the tax cuts that has unleashed the potential of the American people. What that gives them is predictability, allowing them to grow their ideas and grow their businesses in meaningful ways. This last quarter enjoyed a 4.2% growth rate, and we have record employment levels. Our unemployment is like a historic low, particularly among minorities, African American, Asian American, and Hispanic Americans. We're proud of that. My party wants to keep that going with lower taxes, low regulation. Now that's what helps lift people out of poverty. And that's as that capitalism, that free market system is a stark contrast to what the liberals believe. I'd point out that young liberals, only 19% are capitalism. That's scary. Only 57% of liberals at large have a positive view of socialism. Listen, what has helped lift 1 billion people out of poverty has been globalization, free trade, and entrepreneurship. These are fundamental components to my party, and I'm a firm believer that they'll help us in the future.
Paul Davis.
I've spent a lot of time listening to Kansans over these last 15 months and long before that. And while the headlines may say that the economy is getting better, what I hear from everyday Kansans is that the gap between the rich and the middle income and lower income Kansans is just getting wider and wider, and the economy just isn't working for us. You know, Mr. Watkins talked about the tax plan, and that is a big distinction between the two of us. I think there's no greater example of who Washington is working for than this Brownback-style tax plan that just passed through the Congress. 83% of those benefits go to people who make over $900,000 a year. Ask yourself, do you know anybody who makes over $900,000 a year? I don't think that I do. We need tax cuts for people who really need tax cuts. And I voted 150 times to cut taxes when I was in the legislature, whether it was lowering the corporate rate, getting rid of the estate tax, exempting Social Security income, or voting to get rid of our sales tax on food and groceries. These are the kinds of economic policies that are going to help middle-class Kansans. You know, what's made America great is the middle class. And I think we need to invest in proven workforce training programs, whether they are at K through 12 schools, community colleges, or places like Washburn Tech that are helping to retrain people for the jobs of tomorrow and careers that people can support their families on.
Kelly Stanley.
We have a problem right here in our own state, and that's that there isn't enough jobs. They tell you that unemployment's going down. It's not going down. What they're doing is they're not recording those who lost their unemployment benefits. So when they say it's going down, it's not, it's actually going up. I have people in one of my companies who come to me all the time and ask, can I have a job? My unemployment ran out. I have no other choice. I need something to do. With an open heart, I give them a job. I help them. We need more of that. We need more people that are willing to work with each other and give jobs to those who need them. When they talk about the fact that the new tax cuts are actually helping people, in a way, yes, they are. The rich. And the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. The middle class, as always, has to take and pay for majority of everything that is being done by the government. What we need to do is reevaluate that tax bill, and we need to make sure that we go ahead and work it so that the rich don't continue to be rich.
Paul Davis, what is the single most serious threat currently facing the United States?
Well, Nick, I think without a doubt it is the threat of terrorism. You know, there are people all around this globe that want to harm Americans and harm our interests. They want to harm us here in our homeland, and they want to harm us all across this globe. And we have to have a strong military. We have to have a strong intelligence presence so that we can detect those threats and we can defeat them before they try to harm us. I remember 9/11 very vividly, and thankfully both Republican and Democratic presidents have kept us from another attack like that happening to our country. But we have to be very vigilant in making sure that this can never happen again. And I'm going to be a very strong supporter of our military and our intelligence efforts, because I think the first and foremost obligation of our federal government is to keep us safe.
Thank you. Steve Watkins, the most serious threat currently facing the United States is blank. What is that?
Well, it's an analysis, and when people like myself who've done an incredible amount of deep dives into security threats, what we look at, we typically look at capability and will. So we conduct an analysis that might be the top 4 plus 1. For me, that would be Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran, with the +1 being radical Islamic terror. Now, for each of those, you would look at their capability and their will. Russia is the only country that poses an existential threat to the United States. It's the only country that could destroy us with their nuclear weapons. Now we can destroy them as well, but they have the greatest capability, but they don't have the greatest will to do so. And China, same. They're growing that military. And North Korea might, and radical Islamic terror will do a contrast. Radical Islamic terror might not have the capability, but they would have the will. And so when you look at the battle space, when you analyze the threats from a global perspective, that's how you'd go about doing this. I think the Congress needs to be full of people who have conducted similar analysis in their careers, and so they can perform what Paul Davis himself said. It was the fundamental function of the government is to keep our people safe.
Well, you're agreeing on something. That's excellent. Kelly Stanley.
I'm actually going to disagree. Our greatest threat to our country is ourselves, and our inability to teach ourselves how to defend our country on our own. One of the things we need to really consider is, does Washington look after the little guy? They can send military all over the world if they want to defend our borders and to help conquer terrorism around the world. But right here at home is where the threat is. We have such a division between the Republican and Democratic Party. We have people that I've even received hate mail because I'm running against them. And that's a division that we don't need. And it's a division that can endanger our country from other countries and allowing them to bring that division even more wider. And we need to look really closely at what's going on over in other countries, but we need to also check our own selves and see what we can do to change it.
We're going to start the next question with you, Libertarian Party candidate Kelly Stanley. The federal government runs a lot of programs and services. Which one is so good it deserves more money, and which one performs so poorly it deserves to be eliminated?
I knew you would give me that question first. So, the one that actually runs really well, in my opinion, is actually going to be Medicare. It runs very well. The problem we have in that same instance is the supplemental insurance. We have so many people that are living on income that is fixed that they have no choice but to spend money on supplemental insurance, and they can't afford it. So really, Medicare is the greatest thing for this country and our seniors, but the supplemental insurance is the worst thing that we have going on in this country. People need to work hard to be able to change the system so that we have seniors being taken care of with one plan. No more supplemental insurance, just Medicare, and it covers everything.
Thank you. Paul Davis.
Well, Nick, I know a thing or two about balancing budgets. When I served in the state legislature, we had to balance our budget every year. We had to live within our means. And frankly, the folks in Washington, D.C. don't understand that. They just have been writing blank checks forever and ever. And I think what we need to have is a top-to-bottom analysis and of all of our federal spending. I mean, we need to go line item by line item, and no agency should be exempt from that. I've always believed that the dollars that we invest in early childhood education, I think, are some of the best dollars that we spend, because we see a great return on those kids that need a head start in getting off to school, and we're able to keep kids out of trouble because of those things. But you look at two hallmark programs, Medicare and Social Security. They are a commitment that we have made to the American people. We pay into that system and we expect it to be there. And I am going to defend those programs. My opponent, Mr. Watkins, supports a tax plan that will cut Medicare for every American. He supports beans testing Social Security and said that he is open to privatizing it. I simply think that that is wrong. I will stand up for America's seniors and protect our Social Security and our Medicare.
You didn't mention a program that you would eliminate.
Well, Nick, I want to go through the entire budget, and I think that we, it's irresponsible for us to say that any program is off the table. I think that we need to look at every single government program, and Congress has an oversight role to make sure that we are spending our dollars as wisely as
Steve
possible.
Watkins.
The problem here isn't that the United States doesn't have enough money. We're the richest country in the world. The problem is we don't have the financial discipline. I was proud of the fiscal conservative nature of my party, but then I think we allowed that to get a little out of hand. And so, I will say that we spend a lot of money on Social Security and Medicare, but I want to push back and say I'm not advocating that we bait and switch on those at or approaching retirement. They paid into Medicare, and we owe them that, and I'm proposing no change to the Medicare promises that we made to the elderly. And I'd also say that with regards to pre-existing conditions, I'm a complete advocate of protecting those with pre-existing conditions. So, and also when it comes to the possibility of privatizing Social Security, I'm not talking about the system as a whole. I'm talking about as the money's pooled, some of it could potentially, and I just said this is exploratory, I'm looking at possibly sinking some of it into the market as opposed to just buying government bonds. So perhaps the performance could be balanced, a better balanced shift. But going back to what I think needs more money, border security.
I have the opportunity as the moderator to ask a follow-up question that is 1 minute in length to each of you. And let's drill down a little bit on the Social Security question for clarity. At a candidate forum in Southeast Kansas, Mr. Watkins, you said you believe the Social Security program is unsustainable in its current form, and that people of your generation and younger should, quote, prepare for the fact that they won't see the same type of benefits that older generations will receive. So you won't propose any changes to Social Security, and what is your fix then to Social Security that's unsustainable?
Sure. Now
60 seconds, timekeepers.
Sure. This is actually a pretty basic algebra problem. Okay, there's not enough money. It's not sustainable on its current path. There's only so many things that we could tweak here. We could either increase taxes, which I don't support. We could decrease the amount of money that people receive, which is a possibility. Or we could look at means testing. I don't think millionaires are sitting at their house waiting for their Social Security check to arrive. So that's what I meant when I said means testing, and I think we could probably make that money work for itself a little better. That's what I was referring to with the brothers.
Thank you very much. Kelly Stanley, you have the opportunity, if you so wish, to take a bite out of this apple.
Of course. So, when it comes to Social Security, a lot of things that I have looked at is where the government's spending the money and where they have money hidden. And let's look at the FAA trust fund. They have $15.1 billion sitting there, and in the past decade, they've only used $1 million of it, and they used it to call their employees to let them know that they were having a government shutdown. So why can't we take that money that's been sitting there since 1970, drawing interest, and transfer it to Social Security? There's also a lawsuit that has been filed against Iran. We won $200 billion, but yet we haven't collected that money either. So there's a chance that when we look at the lower programs and how much money they have saved, we could transfer those and save Social Security.
Paul Davis, did you want 60 seconds as the follow-up on this?
Yes, Nick. Social Security affects 150,000 people in this congressional district. People like my mom that relies upon that for her income. Many people, it's just their sole source of income. I'm not going to tell you that I have the silver bullet for how that we're going to ensure that Social Security is going to be solvent down the road, but I think what we have to do is we have to have Democrats and Republicans who are willing to work together to address those issues. But what I will not do is I will not cut Social Security because we need to balance the budget. I will not cut Social Security to pay for tax cuts. I will not means test Social Security so that people who pay into the system aren't going to receive it. And I'm certainly not going to do what Mr. Watkins just said that he would be willing to do, and that is to gamble away our senior citizens' Social Security dollars on the New York Stock Exchange. I think that is incredibly irresponsible and just plain wrong.
Thank you. According to the Kansas Bureau of Investigation, the number of murders in Kansas last year was the highest since the KBI started tracking those statistics back in 1959. Paul Davis, what is the single most important action Congress can take to reduce homicides?
Well, we have a problem with gun violence in this country. I am a gun owner. I'm a supporter of the Second Amendment and the individual right to possess a firearm. But I'm also the parent of an 8-year-old that has to go through active shooter drills, something that I never imagined as a kid growing up in Kansas. We're all familiar with tornado drills, but I never imagined having kids go through active shooter drills. I think there are common sense things that we can do to reduce gun violence in this country. We have to have a background check system that works. We have a background check system that has failed repeatedly and has far too many loopholes. We have to make sure that schools have adequate dollars to make sure that they can secure our students. I support President Trump's effort to ban bump stocks. I think that that's something that we absolutely have to do. And as my wife, who is a psychologist, reminds me every day, we have not come close to devoting the attention and the resources to the mental health needs of this country.
Thank you. Kelly Stanley.
We have a problem with violence. We have drug cartels, and Kansas is one of the main routes for these drug cartels. I myself have experienced in a town 18 miles from where I live where drug cartels have actually shot and killed people. That route goes through Oklahoma, through Kansas, up to Kansas City, and so forth, Topeka, Wichita. And we have to learn to deal with these drug cartels. And the way to do that is that we have to have stronger stipulations on gun control. I'm a Second Amendment supporter. I go hunting every year. But what I want are the loopholes closed. I think that will help. I actually went online and bought a gun, but I bought it in parts. And then when I had it all shipped to my home, I was able to put it together. The thought of others being able to do that same thing for their own agenda of causing problems here in Kansas actually woke me up. Loopholes need to be closed. We also need to make sure that those that have mental health problems, by doing a background check, are very, very investigated.
Thank you. Steve Watkins, the single most important action Congress can take to reduce homicides?
Well, obviously these actions act in chorus to help create a better world to live in. And so first I want to say that I'm a proud Second Amendment advocate, I'm a gun owner, and I'm a member of the National Rifle Association. And so gun violence is a big problem, and when I talk with law enforcement professionals, they go on about mental health and how a lot of their energies are spent dealing with the mentally ill. So that's a problem. Without a silver bullet solution, we need it requires a lot of different organizations, entities, and adequate funding. Now, one of the more disturbing aspects of this gun violence, of course, occurs at schools. Now, I'm an engineer, I'm a builder. Nothing terrifies me more than the thought of a live shooter scenario at one of my nephew's schools. Now, as a builder, I look for solutions in the built environment. Now, there is security. It can be cultivated and purchased, and we look at hard stand facilities at our banks, at our ports of entry. That security exists. It exists. We can create it in the buildings that we build, as well as the processes that we create. Now we just fought 2 wars. We have a lot of veterans who I know would stand up and take the charge of being security professionals in these facilities as well.
Thank you very much. We move on to new territory now. There are a number of ideas out there for fixing our healthcare system, health savings accounts, malpractice reform, a single payer system, expanding Medicare for all. Starting with you, Kelly Stanley, the Libertarian Party candidate, what is the #1 most important improvement you would work to implement if you are sent to Washington by voters in November?
So I've actually written a bill that's waiting for Congress, hopefully if I'm elected, and it actually addresses the healthcare issue. And it's combining the ACA and Medicare and getting rid, of course, the supplemental insurance on Medicare. One of the problems that we have today, and in this district alone, we've had 2 hospitals shut down just in the past few years. And we have to be able to make sure that never happens again. My plan actually allows Medicare payments that are coming in right now today be used as their money for insurance. We can work with hospitals, we can work with doctors, we can work with other agencies to make sure that everyone has the coverage they need. There are millions of people in this country, and if millions of people in this country pay a certain amount of money every month, everyone will be able to get coverage.
Thank you. Steve Watkins.
Well, the healthcare system is broken. My father's a physician, so is my wife. This is something that's very personal to my family, and we talk about it a lot, especially since my folks are at or approaching retirement. And the problem is Obamacare, and we need to repeal Obamacare, but there are aspects about it that I like. We need to protect those who have pre-existing conditions. I like that if you can stay on your parents' insurance until you're 26 years old. But what we've got left is a complex set of systems. Now, whenever you have that, and whatever metric that you're looking for, be it faster delivery time, lower cost, higher quality, you need to build the system on a foundation of capitalism, characterized by transparency, characterized by competition, and empowering the doctors. I'm pretty sure that when my wife or father needs to order an x-ray, they can't just simply look at x-ray service providers. We don't enjoy the benefits of the capitalistic free market play to lower down those prices. You know, my opponents is supported by people who believe in this Medicare for all. No, that bankrupt the system. It cost some $32 trillion, resulting in the highest tax hike in the history of modern America. Even California, which is a real leftist state, wouldn't even enact that because they know it would double their debt instantly. We can't afford the solutions being offered by the Democrats. We need to rethink healthcare and build it on a foundation of free market economics.
Thank you. Paul Davis, can you fix healthcare in 90 seconds or less?
Well, first of all, I do not support Medicare for all. At our last debate, Mr. Watkins stood up and told a lie. one of the many lies that he's told in this campaign, and he tried to tell people that I supported Medicare for all, and I never have. So he's telling a little bit less of a lie here tonight. The healthcare issue is a personal one for me. My dad had Parkinson's and passed away earlier this year. He had many medications that he had to take, some of which just to get out of bed every day. One of those medications cost over $1,000 a month. We had to have that kitchen table discussion with my parents about how in the world we were going to afford that. That is a discussion that far too many American families are having right now. It is time that we send some people to Washington who are willing to get tough with the drug companies, who are willing to say enough is enough. You can't increase our prescription drug prices year after year after year after year. There's common sense things that we can do, like giving Medicare the ability to just simply negotiate with the drug companies. We ought to be able to import drugs from countries that have established safety protocols, like Canada and Japan. And we have to make sure that we are looking out for the American consumer. You know, Kelly's right. We had 2 hospitals that closed in this district, and I don't want to see any more. We have to restore some of the cuts that have been made to Medicare so that we can protect the vitality of our rural hospitals. And that's exactly what I'm going to do in Washington.
Thank you very much. You know, I have sheets of questions here on all manner of issues, but the most important person in this room is you. With your questions on Facebook and Twitter, and our studio audience here, that the League of Women Voters have been gathering those questions. As I've been off camera, they've been sending me those questions, including this one. Our nation seems more divided than ever. Starting with you, Steve Watkins, as an elected member of Congress, how do you reduce that division?
I'd recommend voting for Republicans. You know, it's the Democratic Party here that, among other things, they're calling for mob politics. We're above that. We've got key leaders in the Democratic Party. For example, Eric Holder. And when they go low, we kick them. I mean, listen, also Hillary Clinton, who simply can't find it in herself to be civil at this time when we need civility. Now, my opponent, Paul Davis, will caucus with this party, and will contribute to this. Other things that we can expect if the Democrats take control of the House of Representatives include impeachment hearings, higher taxes, partisan investigations. We saw how they treat people, both in the case of Justice Kavanaugh as well as myself, and victimhood and entitlement mentality. You know, it's because I believe that they're driven by this belief that America is inherently flawed. I'm not buying that. America is a wonderful place, and I'm just trying to keep it that way.
Thank you. Paul Davis, you've just been elected. How are you going to, in any way, reduce that division? Can you?
Well, I hope everybody was listening carefully to how Mr. Watkins answered that question. His idea of how we cure this divide is more partisanship. I couldn't agree with that anymore. You know, Mr. Watkins has been relying upon partisanship in this race because he really hasn't been able to connect with people. I have 36 current and former Republican elected officials that have endorsed my candidacy. They're supporting me because they've worked with me. I built bipartisan coalition after bipartisan coalition when I was in the State House in Topeka, and that's the reason why these people support me. Now more than ever, we need people in Congress who are going to work across the aisle, who are going to extend their hand of friendship to people in the other political party. I'm sick of the partisan bickering, and I know that you are too. And so we got to send a problem solver, somebody who has the proven ability to unite Democrats and Republicans. I did that time and time again in the state legislature, and that's exactly what I want to do in Washington, D.C.
Thank you. Kelly Stanley.
We're divided because it's a Republican and Democratic propaganda. If they can turn each other, two party groups against each other, then one side's bound to win. What we really need is someone who actually will call them out on that. We need someone that will be in there and make sure to hold them responsible for the decisions they make. The best way to do that is to actually have a libertarian in there, someone who can actually work with both sides of the aisle, who can actually look at everything that is going on and make sure that it's right for not just this country, but this district. If it doesn't help this district, then that person should not be voting on whatever they're presenting. We need to think of the fact that we're here representing the 2nd District, not our parties. And that's the only way to get rid of the division in this country, is to make sure people understand we are Americans first. That's what counts.
Thank you. I don't actually see this issue in any of the campaign ads for any race this year, but one of the most important issues for you at home that we're getting on Facebook and Twitter is the environment. Paul Davis, what is the #1 action you could take in Congress to improve the environment?
You know, Nick, all of us want to leave this place in a better place for our children and our grandchildren. And I think that we as Americans, you need to be leading and not following. You know, when President Trump removed us from the Paris Climate Accord, I think that he made a major mistake. We became one of 3 countries. Nicaragua and Syria were the other 2 countries who have not signed on to the Paris Climate Accord. You know, climate change is happening. I'm not a scientist, but I can see it out there. And I think that we have to be able to have the courage to make sure that we're going to lead. You know, we are the world's wealthiest country. We're the world's most powerful country. We're also the 2nd largest emitter of carbon. And we need to rally the world. You know, this isn't just a Kansas issue. It's an American issue. This is a global issue. And one of the things that I want to do is I want to work with Democrats and Republicans in the Congress for sound environmental policies. You know, yes, we do need some regulatory reform. I think the EPA has overreached in a number of circumstances, like the Waters of the United States rule that has adversely affected a lot of farmers. But we can be able to save our environment and create a better planet for our children and our grandchildren if we work together as Democrats and Republicans.
Thank you, Steve Watkins. The #1 thing you could do to improve the environment if you're elected to Congress?
Well, we have to look at energy production. I'm an all-American, all-of-the-above energy thinker. That includes, of course, coal and oil, as well as your hydro, wind, solar, biofuels, and even nuclear. And one of the great things about America is we have higher standards than what's overseas. Something you should do before you die is go to Dubai and drive down the Sheikh Zayed Road. See the incredible buildings that they've built, the incredible city and country that they've built, and realize that, you know, don't you think they have enough of our oil money? Or think of Saudi Arabia, which has been in the news a lot lately. Do you think maybe they've got enough of our money? We have a boundless bounty, a plenty of energy here in the U.S. untapped, and we need to focus on that because we do have the highest standards. They don't overseas. We do. The world will be cleaner if we produce our oil, and also it'll insulate us from shocks, threat overseas. If fluctuations in oil prices, fluctuations in energy prices, we'll be insulated from that if we produce our own. Thanks.
Thank you. Kelly Stanley.
To save the global economy and atmosphere, the scientists are saying that we're headed for a catastrophe in the long run. But those scientists also say that we have issues that we can control. So the best thing we can do is continue to look at air energy, battery energy. We need to continue to look at what we're currently working on. California leads really well, but yet they also have highest emissions ever. And one of the things that I have noticed that there is a few other countries out there who are doing a lot of new wonderful technology that allows them to lower the amount of atmospheric danger that there is out there. We need to make sure that when other countries are doing something, we're researching what they're doing as well and trying to use their technology to help benefit us. We can't just be one of those countries that says, yes, we can do it ourselves. We have to look at our partners across the seas and say, you know, what are you doing to help lower the levels of emission in our, you know, we just need to make sure that we check with them.
Thank you very much. Steve Watkins, in your answer, you mentioned Saudi Arabia. That is very much on the minds of our viewers tonight too, and we want to respond to that. How should Congress respond to the killing of a Washington Post contributing writer at the Saudi Arabian consulate in Turkey? That question goes to you first, Kelly Stanley?
It's a shame. You know, as a country, we have responsibilities. And one of our responsibilities is to make sure that other countries do follow the rules, follow the guidelines, follow humanitarian guidelines. And what we're looking at right now is irresponsibility, and we're not doing enough about it. I think that investigations will eventually show not a very good outcome, and I think that actions will need to be taken.
Thank you. Paul Davis.
You know, one of the things that has made America the greatest country in the world is that we have the right to criticize our government, and we think that our government is wrong. That is something that we have celebrated as Americans. It's enshrined in our Constitution. It's who we are as a country. And we have tried to promote that attitude all around the world for decades and decades. And when we see a government that has perhaps executed a member of its own citizenry, I think that we have a responsibility to speak up. We can't just simply take that government at its word. It is wrong for us to do that. You know, we have to be a beacon for humanitarian rights across the world, and we have been that. And I'm really concerned about some of the things that have gone on in Washington and our administration's response to this. And I think leaders in Congress of both political parties need to speak up because we have a responsibility to do so.
Steve Watkins.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes, of course. What should the response of Congress be to the killing of a Washington Post contributing writer at the Saudi Arabian consulate in Turkey?
Well, I think we're still discovering some information, but a few things are clear at this point. Jamal Khashoggi was a journalist. He was in the U.S. He was exiled, self-exiled to D.C., and he'd been on my radar for a long time as being a guy who lived and worked in the Middle East. And his government dispatched 15 to 18 operatives to kill him. Allegedly, they may have intended to kill him, but the idea here is that I know Saudi Arabia to know enough that this order likely came from the top, from Mohammed bin Salman, or MBS. MBS, it's my opinion, he leads with a strong hand, but he's also a reformer. So we are seeing, he did allow women to drive, but what he is, he's tightening the grip on his country, and we see that in Yemen. We see that he basically kidnapped the Lebanese prime minister. So what we've got, I think, is a power-hungry Middle Eastern dictator. I have a bit of experience in the Middle East. I think Congress ought to have people who have that experience to make smart choices. And here you've got a break in the country, and I think it's largely going to be characterized by some civil unrest.
Thank you very much. I have time for a very short question here. Again, on my card here, it's going to start with you, Steve Watkins. There's a very simple answer to this question for each of you.
Yes.
What is the single proudest accomplishment of your career?
Nick, being here with you.
Oh,
No,
I love it.
Transitioning out of my life in the Middle East, which I was so happy of, and doing my best to try and serve the American people in a new, exciting way for me.
Kelly Stanley?
Taking myself from being homeless and surviving cancer and being able to build 3 corporations that are all profitable and actually paid for.
And the single proudest accomplishment for Paul Davis is what?
Well, that's an easy question. She's sitting right out here in the audience. My wonderful wife that I've been married to for over 10 years, who's dedicated her life to serving veterans and reminds me every day that we need to honor the commitment of our American veterans and give them the respect that they so richly deserve.
Which action by the Trump administration, this is a very quick answer to this one, starting with you, Paul Davis, do you support the most? Which do you oppose the most?
Well, I support President Trump's call to reform prescription drug costs. I think that we absolutely have to do that. And What I'm concerned the most about, though, is the tariffs. They are hurting people in eastern Kansas day in and day out, and we have to do something about that.
Kelly Stanley.
I'm going to agree for once that the tariffs have actually hurt this state. But Trump, and I know what you're asking for the best, and the best part that he actually did was that he actually did order some changes that worked well for our country when it comes to jobs.
Jobs. Okay, Steve Watkins, the Republican candidate. Which issue do you support the most and oppose the most?
Tax cuts I support the most, and tariffs I support the least.
Okay, that is where we wrap up the question and answer phase of this conversation. It's time for our candidates now to make their final case directly to you at home. They have 90 seconds to do so, and Paul Davis, your 90 seconds starts now.
I'm a lifelong Kansan, the son of 2 teachers, a husband, and a father. My wife and I are raising our 8-year-old daughter here because Kansas is our home. I've also been a member of my local Chamber of Commerce for almost 20 years. I'm endorsed by firefighters, police officers, and 36 Republican elected officials. They support me because they know who I am. They've worked with me, and they know that I'll work across the aisle. Fellow Republicans have called my opponent, Steve Watkins, a liar, a fraud, and a rank opportunist. He hasn't lived in Kansas for over 20 years. He doesn't own a home here. He hasn't paid taxes here. In fact, he owns 2 homes in Alaska, and his wife lives in Massachusetts. He didn't bother to vote in an election until he decided to become a candidate for Congress. He said over and over again that he started a business and he owned that business, but it wasn't true. He claimed that he supported President Trump, but he didn't vote for President Trump. He says that he supports law enforcement, but yet he condones comments that call our police officers racist and criminal thugs. He's represented that he'll protect Social Security and Medicare, but he supports a plan that will cut Medicare, and he supports means testing Social Security and privatizing it. We need somebody that we can trust to lower our healthcare costs, to get our economy working again for working people, and to make sure that Washington is accountable to us,
Thank
the American
you very
people.
much. That is Paul Davis, the Democratic Party candidate running for the Kansas 2nd Congressional District, by the way, currently held by Lynn Jenkins, who is not seeking re-election. The next candidate statement, final closing statement, goes to the Republican candidate, Steve Watkins. Your 90 seconds starts now.
Let me thank you again, KTWU, Nick Haynes, the League of Women Voters of Kansas, for hosting the debate. I want to thank the folks here and everyone watching at home. Together, let's pause to remember that although we have our differences, we are Americans first. What divides us is not as great as what unites us. America is the greatest country in the world. I just want to keep it that way. I want to make the government more efficient, more effective, and more accountable. We must fundamentally keep our borders and our communities safe. We must have quality health care, and we must work to maintain economic growth. You have 2 choices, a liberal lawyer or a conservative leader, a career insider or a career outsider. You have the choice of selecting liberalism, an ideology that's characterized by mob politics, partisan gridlock, entitlements, victimhood mentality, and a nanny state. Or you can choose a Republican and promote conservative values, conservative ideals, low taxes, no unnecessary regulations, safe borders, pro-life, religious liberty, and patriotism. Thank you for your attention. My name is Steve Watkins, and I love your vote. God bless you. God bless America.
Thank you, Steve Watkins, the Republican Party candidate for the 2nd Congressional District. We finally hear from Kelly Stanley, who is representing the Libertarian Party. Your 90 seconds starts now.
It's very clear of what we have here. You've heard it tonight. I've been standing up here listening to it as well. We have a division in our country between the Republicans and the Democrats. It's your vote. It's your vote that matters. It's your vote that counts. If you're going to have a representative in Washington working for you, then please, with your heart, choose the candidate that will work for the people in the 2nd Congressional District. I was raised in Kansas. Kansas has been my home for years. I'm raising my son here. I'm a single father. And I'm also a guardian to several other children. And I want you to understand the work that I would do for you is only going to benefit the 2nd Congressional District. That's the part that matters the most, is the work that is being done right here in our own area. We need more jobs. We need more people to be able to have education and afford it and not be able to come out of school in debt. A vote for me is a vote for liberty. Thank you.
Kelly Stanley is the Libertarian Party candidate in this race. One of these three men will replace Lynn Jenkins as the Kansas 2nd Congressional District representative in Washington, representing 700,000 Kansans. You've been watching the three candidates wanting to represent you in Washington in this district. Our thanks to Paul Davis, Steve Watkins, and Kelly Stanley. On behalf of our debate partner from the League of Women Voters, from the production crew and volunteers here at the studios of KTWU in Topeka, I'm Nick Haynes. Thank you so much for watching, and good night.
Thank you.
Okay, you guys, if you wouldn't mind staying put for just a second.
Absolutely.
Mr. Stanley?
Yes. Absolutely.
We're in the picture.
Did you need a name napkin or anything? We're gonna keep you guys here for a second so we can do some station IDs. So basically what it'll be is, hi, I'm Steve Watkins, and you're watching KTWU. Hi, I'm Paul Davis, watching KTWU, and okay.
I'm not Paul Davis.
We'll really throw everybody off and we'll use another name.
Thank you, Josh. Let me know when you guys are ready for this. Oh, Facebook Live is still going. That's